Imagine a company that built the actual physical rear fuselage parts for the Enola Gay bomber, completely dominated early NASCAR with just unparalleled handling, and then just, well, vanished.
Yeah, completely wiped from the map.
Right. And now imagine that same dead company suddenly reappearing today in 2026, launching a GoFundMe page and promising to build massive V8 muscle cars.
While the rest of the industry is, actively pulling back on electric vehicles, it's wild.
It is wild.
Yeah.
And that is exactly why we are taking a deep dive today. We're charting the incredible life, death, and literal 2026 resurrection of the Hudson Motor Company.
It is a phenomenal trajectory to track. I mean, we're looking at a brand that fundamentally shaped 20th century engineering, completely disappeared into the archives, and is now trying to claw its way back into the modern market using a very unorthodox playbook.
Unorthodox is an understatement, and we know you listening love thoroughly unpacking these fascinating, multi-layered stories without getting bogged down by info overload. So we pulled together a massive stack of sources today.
Yeah, quite the mix of materials, too.
Exactly. We're pulling from vintage 1953 Hudson Service Merchandiser magazines, historical encyclopedia entries, incredibly detailed World War II production archives,
And then jumping straight into hot off the presses 2026 digital footprints, which is quite the whiplash.
total whiplash. That modern trail includes a recent United States Patent and Trademark Office filing, YouTube transcripts, and actual live crowdfunding data.
Going from faded black and white factory schematics to a modern digital manifesto makes for a jarring transition. But, well, it makes perfect sense when you look at their origins.
Well, so.
Because to understand how Hudson could even attempt to come back today, we have to look at how they shattered industry expectations on day one. I mean, they were never a conventional automaker.
Right, so let's set the scene. The year is 1909. The company is founded by 8 individuals in Detroit, most notably these automotive pioneers, Roy Chapin and Howard Coffin. But, fission doesn't build assembly lines.
No, money builds assembly lines.
Exactly. They needed serious capital, and they secured it from Joseph L. Hudson, the massive Detroit department store magnate.
And that financial backing from J.L. Hudson, it allowed them to hit the ground running at just an unprecedented scale. In their very first year, they sold 4,000 of their original 4-cylinder models.
Which was a big deal back then, right?
Oh, massive. At the time, that was the highest first-year sales record for any automobile company in history. They didn't gradually build a market presence, they just exploded into it.
And they refused to coast on that initial success, too.
Sure.
By 1913, they introduced the Super 6 engine.
Yeah, the Super 6.
This powertrain made Hudson the world's largest manufacturer of 6-cylinder cars almost overnight. By 1916, that engine is breaking transcontinental speed records, setting new climb records at Pikes Peak.
They really established an early reputation for power and durability. But their most critical pivot point, the engineering philosophy that would eventually define their entire existence, that arrived in 1932.
Right in the middle of the Great Depression.
Exactly. While the Depression was stalling research and development across most major industries, Hudson pushed forward and introduced what they called unit engineering.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because the concept could be a bit abstract. It's kind of like replacing a heavy, layered winter outfit with a single, high-tech thermal suit.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Like you lose all the bulky layers, but you keep the structural strength. Instead of building a heavy frame and resting a separate body on top, they integrated it.
Right. They were bolting the body directly to the frame, treating the entire car as a single structural unit. So by eliminating the heavy, redundant cross members required to bolt a separate body to a chassis, they shed hundreds of pounds of useless, dragging weight.
Which is huge for performance.
Huge. But more importantly, what's fascinating here is they radically increased the torsional rigidity of the vehicle. The car simply didn't flex the way a traditional body-on-frame car did.
And that obsession with structural integrity and shedding weight, it wasn't just a marketing gimmick for the showroom. It ended up catching the eye of the United States military, precisely when they needed lightweight, rigid structures for the skies.
Exactly. When the U.S. entered World War II, Hudson's advanced engineering principles were drafted into service. Between 1941 and 1945, they had to pivot entirely away from civilian passenger cars to manufacture the machinery of war.
And they were incredibly good at it. The sheer scale of their production earned them the Army-Navy E Award for production excellence twice.
Twice, yeah, which is not easy to do.
I want to read off some of the numbers from our historical archives because they are almost difficult to comprehend. At their Centerline plant in Michigan, They produced over 33,000 20-millimeter Oerlikon anti-aircraft guns.
Wow.
They manufactured over 1 million aluminum pistons for Wright aircraft engines. They also had a massive marine division, building 4,000 Hall-Scott Invader marine engines.
And what's wild about those marine engines is that the Navy's requirement was that they had to hit 250 horsepower to effectively power the Higgins landing craft.
Right, but Hudson didn't just meet that baseline.
No, their versions consistently tested out at 263.7 horsepower. They brought automotive performance standards to military hardware.
But their greatest contribution, by far, was in aerospace manufacturing.
Oh, definitely. Because aviation tolerances are exponentially stricter than standard automotive manufacturing. Yet Hudson built 4,250 entire wing sets for the SB-2C Helldiver dive bomber.
That is insane.
It really is. They built over 3,000 cabins for the P-63 King Cobra fighter plane and over 790 wing sections for the iconic P-38 Lightning.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me, but also kind of confusing.
Yeah.
How does an automobile manufacturer seamlessly transition from building family sedans to crafting highly sensitive aeronautical components for fighter planes? Like, you don't just flip a switch on a factory floor.
No, it was a monumental logistical nightmare.
Yeah.
But Detroit had spent decades perfecting the absolute science of mass production, standardization, and quality control. To give you an idea of the physical retooling involved, just for those Hall-Scott marine engines alone, Hudson had to take over 6,000 individual fixtures, machine tools, and quality control gauges from the original designer.
6,000.
Yeah, and they had to completely re-educate their workforce. But they proved that the structured, repetitive nature of an automotive assembly line could be adapted to produce complex, highly sensitive military hardware.
They essentially took the assembly line and weaponized it.
Exactly.
And that leads to the bombers. The archives show they built over 1,800 rear fuselage sections for the B-26 Marauder. But then the war effort demands the B-29 Superfortress.
The B-29 was the most advanced, complex, and expensive military project of the entire war. I mean, it cost more to develop than the Manhattan Project itself.
And Hudson built 802 rear fuselages and outboard wing sections for the B-29 program. And looking directly at the Smithsonian records in our source stack. Well, actually, looking at the record.
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
It is. The rear fuselages, the outer wings, the ailerons, for both the Enola Gay and Boxcar, the specific bombers that dropped the atomic bombs. Those physical parts were built by Hudson in Detroit.
It leaves an incredibly profound historical footprint.
It really does.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't just forget those strict aerospace tolerances when the war ended. They took all of that knowledge about lightweight structural rigidity and poured it directly into their post-war passenger cars.
Which inadvertently created the ultimate racing machine.
Yes. Let's talk about the 1948 introduction of their mono-built chassis.
Right, which became famously known in the industry as the step-down design.
This is where the engineering gets so cool. Instead of sitting a car body on top of a frame rail, the chassis and the frame were unified into one structure. But the floor pan was actually suspended between the frame rails.
So when you got into a 1948 Hudson, you didn't step up onto the floorboards. You literally had to step down into the passenger compartment.
And by placing the floor pan inside the perimeter of the frame, they drastically lowered the car's overall center of gravity without sacrificing any necessary road clearance.
Which is brilliant.
When you drop the center of gravity that significantly, you suddenly have a car that hugs the road like a magnet. Combine that chassis with their massive 308 cubic inch flathead inline-six engine, and in 1951, the fabulous Hudson Hornet is born.
It was an absolute revelation on the track. But, it required the right visionaries to push it to its absolute limits.
Enter Marshall Teese.
Legendary driver.
Yeah, the story of the archives is amazing. He travels to Michigan, totally unannounced, walks right into the Hudson plant, and basically tells the executives, "Your car is a beast on the track, you need to back me."
And the crazy part is he actually manages to walk out with official corporate support.
He does. He and his brilliant crew chief, Smokey Unick, take that inline-six engine and tune it to its absolute maximum stock capability.
And the result of that partnership was total unmitigated stock car dominance. In 1952 alone, Hudson Hornets won 27 out of 34 major NASCAR events.
That's practically a sweep.
Oh, it was a dynasty. You had Herb Thomas winning championships in 1951 and 1953 in his famous number 92 car. You had Tim Flock winning the Grand National Champion Cup in 1952.
Okay, but I need to challenge the mechanics here.
Sure.
Because on paper, it doesn't make sense. You have a knowledgeable automotive crowd listening right now who knows that a lower center of gravity is generally good. But Hudson was racing an inline-six against competitors who were rolling out supposedly much more powerful V8 engines.
Right, the Oldsmobiles and Cadillacs.
Exactly. So how are you overcoming a massive horsepower deficit on a dirt track just because your floorboards are a few inches lower?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of physics, it comes down to suspension geometry and slip angles. Yes, the V8s had incredible brute straight-line speed, but races aren't run on infinite straight lines, you know? They are one in the corners.
Okay, that makes sense.
When a heavy, high center of gravity, body-on-frame V8 competitor hit a corner on a dirt track, the driver had to brake aggressively. They had to manage that massive weight transfer to avoid rolling or sliding out into the wall.
But the Hudson didn't have that problem.
Exactly. The Hudson, with its step-down unibody design, had drastically less chassis flex. It wasn't top-heavy. So Marshall Teague and Herb Thomas didn't have to brake nearly as hard.
They could just carry the speed through.
Right. They could maintain significantly higher cornering speeds, gliding through the turns and carrying that momentum onto the straightaways. They didn't need to accelerate as hard out of the corner because they never lost their speed going into it.
Wow. So it was a victory of handling and unibody rigidity over raw, unbalanced horsepower. They just drove circles around the bigger engines.
They absolutely did. And the dominance was so absolute that the legacy is literally immortalized in pop culture today.
Oh, yeah. If you've ever seen the Pixar movie Cars, Paul Newman voices the character Doc Hudson, who is a 1951 fabulous Hudson Hornet.
And he sports the number 51, which is a direct nod to the model year. It is a fitting tribute to a chassis that fundamentally changed the trajectory of stock car racing.
It really is.
But, as we know, being the undisputed king of the dirt track doesn't automatically make you the king of the dealership showroom.
No, it doesn't. If you're a fan of automotive history listening to this, you know how ruthless the 1950s market was. It wasn't enough to just have the best engineered car. You had to have the deepest pockets.
The post-war marketplace was a brutal war of attrition against the big three Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler.
And Hudson simply didn't have the vast dealer networks, the massive advertising budgets, or the economies of scale to survive that specific kind of financial warfare forever.
Right. So by 1954, facing a slow, painful decline in sales, they entered into what was, at the time, the largest corporate merger in U.S. history. Hudson merged with Nash Kelvinator to form American Motors Corporation, or AMC.
It was a necessary survival tactic.
It was, but it initiated the slow erasure of the Hudson identity. A few cars were released bearing the Hudson badge under the new AMC umbrella, but by 1957, the name was officially retired. The standalone factory doors closed, the brand was buried.
Dead and gone. A closed chapter in the history of Detroit. Or, well, so everyone thought, until right now.
Fast forward to 2026.
Yes, 2026. We are tracking a brand new, audacious movement to bring Hudson back from the grave. And this isn't just some vague internet rumor on a message board.
No, there's paper trail.
A very real paper trail.
Yeah.
On March 19th, 2026, a company formally calling itself Hudson Motor Company, LLC, filed an official application with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. The trademark they are claiming? Hudson Prospector.
Securing a trademark is a clear signal of intent to manufacture. But, I mean, launching an automotive startup requires immense capital, usually billions of dollars.
Which is exactly where this story gets highly unorthodox. They have a live GoFundMe campaign right now. The stated goal is to raise $50,000.
Just $50,000.
It's $50,000. And looking at the live data on the page today, it currently sits at exactly $10,020.
And that $10,000 comes from just two individual donors.
Two donors. The banner on the campaign reads, "Restoring American Craftsmanship." But it's their YouTube manifesto that really lays out the battle plan.
What does the video transcript say?
We pulled it from our sources, and it declares that they are fully incorporated, that they have secured a drivetrain partnership, and most surprisingly, they're specifically targeting a, and I quote, V8-powered lineup as industry navigates EV pullback.
They also dropped this highly dramatic, almost poetic quote in the video, right?
Oh yeah, they say, "Always dark before light, brother. I know my right. I'm going to stand in."
It is a fiercely defiant posture. I mean, they are drawing a line in the sand regarding modern automotive trends.
This is wild to me. It's like a legacy rock band getting back together after 70 years. But instead of playing the trendy electronic pop that everyone else is doing, like EVs, they're doubling down, plugging in the heavy amplifiers and releasing a brand new, massive V8 rock album.
And they're turning the amps up to 11 during an era where everyone else is going acoustic? From a business strategy perspective, analyzing the 2026 market dynamics makes this fascinating. This raises an important question about timing.
Right, why now?
Well, the broader automotive industry is currently navigating a significant EV pullback due to infrastructure bottlenecks, range anxiety, and market saturation. By actively leaning into heavy V8 internal combustion engines right now, this new iteration of Hudson is making a highly specific bet.
So they aren't even trying to compete with Tesla or Rivian.
Not at all. They're not trying to compete with modern tech giants on battery efficiency or autonomous driving. They are banking entirely on nostalgia, the romanticism of American craftsmanship, and a very specific, passionate consumer base that deeply craves the visceral, mechanical roar of a traditional gas-powered engine.
They are looking at the current, highly digitized automotive landscape and aggressively going in the exact opposite direction.
Exactly.
Is an incredible journey we've tracked today. From a 1909 Detroit startup funded by a department store magnate to churning out millions of wartime components and literally building the tails of the bombers that ended World War II.
From revolutionizing car design with a step-down monobuilt chassis to completely owning NASCAR with the fabulous Hudson Hornet.
And now to an audacious 2026 crowdfunding revival built on the promise of raw V8 power.
It highlights how deeply intertwined the history of a single manufacturing company can be with the broader arc of American industrial shifts, warfare, and cultural identity.
And it's a great reminder for you listening of why this history matters. It's a testament to how a single engineering philosophy, like lowering a center of gravity to optimize slip angles or committing fully to unibody construction, can echo across an entire century of design. It proves that no brand, if it has a strong enough story and a loyal enough following, is ever truly dead.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering thought for you to mull over. If a long-dead automaker like Hudson can attempt to resurrect itself today by actively rejecting the current electric vehicle trend and embracing its loud, gas-powered roots,
Yeah.
what does that say about the future of innovation? Is it possible that sometimes the ultimate disruption isn't a relentless leap into the digital future, but a deliberate return to the raw, mechanical spirit of the past?